In the late 1930s, Europe was a powder keg of political tension and military ambition. Among the many dramatic twists and turns of this period, few were as consequential as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Signed on August 23, 1939, this non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union stunned the world. The pact, named after German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop and Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, was a cynical agreement of convenience. It allowed Hitler to launch his invasion of Poland without fear of Soviet intervention, while Stalin gained time to strengthen his military and expand Soviet territory westward. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact had profound strategic implications. For Hitler, it meant a green light to unleash blitzkrieg on Poland on September 1, 1939, igniting World War II. The Soviet Union, in turn, invaded Poland from the east on September 17, 1939, and also annexed the Baltic states and parts of Finland and Romania. This alliance between two ideologically opposed regimes was shocking to the world. Hitler, with his vehement anti-communism, and Stalin, with his distrust of the fascists, made for unlikely bedfellows. But this unholy alliance was built on shaky foundations. Neither dictator trusted the other. Stalin was wary of Hitler's expansionist rhetoric and Nazi ideology, which condemned communism. Hitler, for his part, saw the Soviet Union as both a long-term threat and a vast land of resources to be conquered for his vision of Lebensraum, or living space for the German people. This temporary marriage of convenience was just that, temporary. As the war in Europe raged, tensions between the two regimes grew. Stalin, while benefiting from the temporary peace to build up his defenses, could not ignore the ominous signs of German intentions. The flow of intelligence reports, coupled with the rapid German victories in Western Europe, suggested that the pact was merely a prelude to a more significant conflict. Hitler's ideological motivations further exacerbated these tensions. His racial theories and virulent anti-communism made the invasion of the Soviet Union a cornerstone of his grand strategy. Operation Otto to Barbarossa, planning the invasion. The initial plan to invade the Soviet Union, dubbed Operation Otto, began to take shape in the summer of 1940, soon after the fall of France. The swift victory in the West emboldened Hitler, who believed that the Soviet Union could be knocked out of the war in a matter of months. The conquest of Western Europe had demonstrated the effectiveness of blitzkrieg tactics and boosted Hitler's confidence in the invincibility of the Wehrmacht. However, the initial plan of Operation Otto quickly evolved into a more detailed and ambitious strategy known as Operation Barbarossa. Named after the medieval Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who had sought to expand Germanic power in the east, this plan aimed to destroy the Soviet Union through a series of rapid, decisive battles. The goal was to annihilate the Red Army, capture key cities, and occupy critical economic areas, thus ensuring the complete collapse of Soviet resistance. The Germans severely underestimated the Red Army, believing it to be poorly led, inadequately equipped, and demoralized by Stalin's purges, which had decimated the Soviet officer corps. Nazi propaganda dehumanized the Soviet people, portraying them as subhuman and justifying the brutal tactics that would be employed. This gross miscalculation led to significant strategic and tactical errors. The German High Command failed to appreciate the depth of Soviet industrial capacity and the sheer size of the Red Army. The logistical challenges of Operation Barbarossa were immense. The vast distances across the Soviet Union, coupled with its poor infrastructure, posed significant problems for supply lines and troop movements. The German supply system, already stretched by the rapid advances in Western Europe, faced unprecedented strain. Rail gauges differed between Germany and the Soviet Union, necessitating complex logistical adjustments and hindering the efficient transport of troops and supplies. Furthermore, the operation had a critical time constraint. The German High Command aimed to achieve its objectives before the onset of the Russian winter. The experiences of Napoleon's Grande Armée in 1812 loomed large in their minds, emphasizing the need for a swift campaign. This urgency led to an overextension of supply lines and insufficient preparation for a protracted conflict. Three-pronged attack, strategic plans. The German plan of attack involved a three-pronged offensive. Army Group North, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm von Lieb, This group was to advance through the Baltic states and capture Leningrad. The capture of Leningrad was intended to cut off Soviet access to the Baltic Sea, secure northern supply lines, and create a strong northern anchor for further operations. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, the main thrust of the German offensive was aimed at Moscow. By capturing the Soviet capital, the Germans hoped to deliver a decisive blow to Soviet command and control, disrupt their administration, and cause a political collapse. The rapid capture of key cities like Minsk and Smolensk along the way was crucial for maintaining the momentum. Army Group South, led by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, this group targeted Ukraine's rich agricultural regions and industrial areas, including the vital coal and iron resources of the Donbas region. Capturing Kiev and pushing towards the Black Sea and the Caucasus was seen as essential for denying the Soviets critical resources and cutting off southern supply routes. These forces included nearly 150 divisions, with over 3 million men, 600,000 motor vehicles and 750,000 horses. Supporting this vast array were the Luftwaffe and various Axis allies, including Finland and Romania, contributing additional troops and resources. This invasion force represented the largest and most powerful military operation ever assembled. Part 2, June 22, 1941, the invasion begins. At dawn on June 22, 1941, the German Wehrmacht launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in the history of warfare. Across an 1,800-mile front, over 3 million Axis troops surged into Soviet territory, supported by thousands of aircraft and tanks. The surprise was total. Soviet forces, despite some intelligence warnings, were caught off guard and in disarray. Initial German successes were spectacular. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and annihilated in massive battles of encirclement, such as those at Bialystok and Minsk, leading to the capture of hundreds of thousands of Soviet prisoners. The Blitzkrieg, or lightning war strategy, proved devastatingly effective in the early weeks. German panzer divisions raced ahead, creating deep penetrations into Soviet lines and bypassing major fortifications. Soviet command and control structures crumbled, and chaos spread through the Red Army ranks. The initial thrusts towards key cities like Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev seemed unstoppable. The Luftwaffe gained air superiority quickly, further paralyzing Soviet responses. German forces advanced rapidly, covering hundreds of miles in a matter of weeks. The Soviets were overwhelmed, their defenses collapsing under the weight of the German onslaught. The destruction was immense, with towns and villages obliterated and countless Soviet soldiers and civilians killed or captured. The scale of the invasion and the speed of the German advance were unprecedented. The drive towards Moscow became the focal point of German strategy. Key battles at Minsk and Smolensk saw the Germans inflict heavy losses on the Soviets, further boosting their confidence. The Soviets, adopting a scorched earth policy, destroyed infrastructure and resources to deny them to the advancing Germans. Partisan resistance also began to harass German supply lines, creating additional challenges. The capture of Moscow was seen as crucial. It was not only the political and administrative heart of the Soviet Union, but also a major transportation hub. The Germans believed that taking Moscow would cripple Soviet command and control, leading to a collapse of organized resistance. However, as the Wehrmacht advanced deeper into Soviet territory, logistical problems mounted. The vast distances stretched supply lines to their limits. The terrain and weather began to take their toll, with muddy roads slowing progress. Despite these issues, the Germans pressed on, believing that capturing Moscow would deliver a fatal blow to Soviet resistance. By October 1941, the Germans were at the gates of Moscow. The Soviet capital was in a state of panic, with civilians and government officials evacuating. However, the Soviets had been preparing for this moment. Reinforcements, including fresh Siberian troops trained for winter warfare, were rushed to the front. The stage was set for a monumental clash. Part 3, Battle of Moscow, the decisive turning point. As German forces neared Moscow in October 1941, the Soviet defense stiffened. Reinforcements, including fresh Siberian troops trained for winter warfare, were rushed to the front. The onset of the harsh Russian winter further compounded German difficulties. Vehicles and equipment failed in the freezing temperatures, and soldiers suffered from inadequate winter clothing. On December 5, 1941, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive. The Germans, already stretched thin and exhausted, were forced into a hasty retreat. The myth of German invincibility was shattered. This battle marked a decisive turning point, demonstrating that the Soviet Union would not be easily defeated. The Soviet counteroffensive pushed the Germans back from Moscow, inflicting severe losses. This was a psychological blow to the German army, which had believed itself invincible. The failure to capture Moscow marked the first major defeat for the Wehrmacht and signaled a shift in the momentum of the war. The siege of Leningrad began in September 1941 and lasted nearly 900 days, resulting in horrific suffering and loss of life. Despite starvation and relentless bombardment, the city's defenders and residents held out, symbolizing Soviet resilience. Meanwhile, the battle for Stalingrad, which began in the summer of 1942, became a brutal war of attrition. Both sides suffered staggering casualties in intense urban combat. The strategic importance of Stalingrad was immense. Controlling the city would secure German access to the oil-rich Caucasus and cut Soviet supply lines. However, the Soviet defense, led by General Vasily Chuikov, was tenacious. In November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, encircling the German Sixth Army. By February 1943, the German forces in Stalingrad surrendered, marking a devastating defeat for Hitler. The sieges of Leningrad and Stalingrad highlighted the brutal nature of the Eastern Front. Civilians and soldiers alike endured unimaginable hardships. The battles were characterized by ferocity and high casualties, with both sides committed to total victory. The Soviet victories in these sieges boosted morale and demonstrated the resilience and determination of the Soviet people. Part 4. Retreat and Defeat. The Battle of Kursk in July 1943 was the largest tank battle in history. The Germans aimed to encircle and destroy Soviet forces in a pincer attack. However, the Soviets had anticipated the assault and fortified their positions. The ensuing battle saw massive tank engagements and fierce fighting. The German offensive was blunted, and the Soviets seized the initiative, launching counteroffensives that pushed the Germans back. From this point onward, the Red Army maintained the strategic initiative. The Germans were forced into a series of retreats, abandoning vast territories. Soviet offensives, combined with increasing Allied pressure on other fronts, stretched German resources and morale to the breaking point. The defeat at Kursk marked a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union began a series of relentless offensives, pushing the Germans back toward their own borders. The Red Army's growing strength and the increasing effectiveness of Soviet tactics and leadership played crucial roles in this shift. The cost of Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa had catastrophic consequences. The human and material losses were staggering. Millions of soldiers and civilians perished, and vast areas were devastated. The Eastern Front became the deadliest theater of World War II, characterized by brutal combat, immense suffering and atrocities, including the Holocaust, which saw the systematic extermination of Jews and other targeted groups. Barbarossa marked a turning point in the war. The failure to defeat the Soviet Union quickly and decisively doomed Nazi Germany to a prolonged and ultimately losing struggle. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad and subsequent offensives shifted the balance of power, leading to the eventual collapse of the Third Reich in 1945. The war on the Eastern Front also reshaped the post-war world, leading to the emergence of the Soviet Union as a superpower and setting the stage for the Cold War. Operation Barbarossa stands as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of ideological fanaticism and the immense human cost of total war. The resilience and sacrifice of the Soviet people, the strategic blunders of the Nazi leadership, and the brutal nature of the conflict continue to be subjects of profound historical reflection and analysis. The legacy of Barbarossa is a testament to the enduring consequences of war and the importance of learning from history to prevent such tragedies in the future.